Okay. So like I said, we're going to do things a little more fast paced this semester. A lot of that was because one, it was a brand new class last fall. But students loved it so much and they gave me tons of feedback about what they liked. And so I emphasized that in the class. In other words, let's do 3 weeks of that instead of just 2 weeks and glazing through it. So to get everybody started, the first thing you guys have to do is go out here to the GitHub Student Developer Pack and sign up for this Student Developer Pack. This is going to give you a huge amount of resources for free. You're all students, right? So if you sign up, obviously you're the student one. So you'll click on the Get Student Benefits. If you guys don't have a GitHub account, create that account, all right? And you're going to get a huge amount of, let me see if it'll show me the benefits. I haven't done the school side yet. I'll work on that at some point. Students, Student Developer Pack.
I do like how they have
So let's go ahead and let's see if I can log in here.
be enrolled in a degree and be at least 13 years old.
Yeah.
What tab was the student developer pack under?
Sorry, it is in week 1. And under week 1, you'll have this GitHub Student Developer Pack link. Oh, here, let me zoom in. You guys can't see nothing up there. There we go. And then you'll follow in, you'll log in. Like right now, I'd have to say, yes, I'm a student. I'm not a student, so I'm not going to click that. Yeah, whatever. I want to click on it anyway. All right, give me the list of all the features. That's what I really want. Oh, come on. Never mind. I was verified as faculty. You don't get benefits. Okay. What I really wanted to show you was the benefits that are in here. Anyway, you're going to get a whole series of stuff, right? So you're going to get access to DigitalOcean, which if you guys don't know about that is a hosting service. That is where you guys will deploy your code. So I've been working with this and do this on my own. I own a consulting company on that. You guys will get to deploy the same code like I do in my web consulting company. So if I got to deploy a new app or a new web application right away, you guys will be doing that as well. All right. So GitHub, make sure you get a GitHub account, make sure you get registered. I will show you guys how to tie that into the IDE as we get going here in a little bit, but you want all the free resources out of there. And I encourage you guys to take advantage of that GitHub pack. All right. Outside of that, you have a choice of 2 different IDEs in this class. If you're a Visual Studio guy, by all means use Visual Code. All right. I don't care. If you're not tied to that or married to that, I recommend using PyCharm, which is from JetBrains. That is what I'm going to use in this class is PyCharm and JetBrains. But there's nothing against using Visual Studio. So just know that I won't be able to walk you through and I won't be able to help you with the nuances of it. Most people that use Visual Code know how to do that kind of stuff, right? There's always an equivalent of whatever I'm doing in JetBrains in Visual Code. But personally, if you're doing Python projects, nothing's better than PyCharm. And it'll work similar to Visual Code where you can snap in multiple languages and do what you want to do. I just love PyCharm for this. The other reason I love PyCharm for this is as you guys get up to Django, it has a whole lot of autofill in and a lot of things to help you structure your program. So if you're making mistakes, it tells you you're making mistakes. Like it has a whole framework built for Django. So, and Flask and all the other ones we're going to be covering. All right. So obviously go out and get your Visual Studio Code if you want that. Otherwise, I encourage you to go to JetBrains Student. So come out here and sign up with JetBrains. Obviously, you're going to get access to their entire line. PyCharm Professional is a huge, I think it's like $199 a year or something like that. It's expensive. You guys get it for free. All right. And there is PyCharm free. There's like a free edition or a student edition that is not the same as what you're getting as part of this package. All right. That one is like for just doing regular old Python projects. This one is built for Django and Flask and all the stuff we're going to cover in this class. All right. So fill this out, use your university email address, you're an undergraduate, graduate, etc. Fill out all this information. It's going to get you a license key. And then from there, you can get JetBrains installed. All right. JetBrains being the overall company, you specifically want to use PyCharm. So if you go out to JetBrains, after you guys get logged in, you are going to want to download their toolbox is usually the best thing I've recommend. So if you go out to, where's it at? Developers, there you go. And you scroll down over here, you're eventually going to see their toolbox, wherever the toolbox went. So yeah, there's this PyCharm for education. Don't use that one. You guys are going to use PyCharm Professional. Where is the toolbox? They've changed a lot of stuff here in this last year. There it is, Toolbox app. So if you go to developer tools at the top off the main JetBrains website, you'll see this Toolbox app. Download the Toolbox app for whatever system you like to code on, Windows, Mac, whatever, doesn't matter. Download and install that. From there, you will download and install the different IDEs that you would like to use from PyCharm or from JetBrains. All right. The reason I have you do it in this fashion is this will have an update manager and some other stuff to keep track. You're always on the newest version. So I always update the toolbox as we go through. Plus, it's an easy way to install some of the extra stuff you will get to play with later. So once you have JetBrains Toolbox installed, you're going to see something like this over here for the toolbox. If it loads on my machine, come on. There you go. And so once these are there, you can see that there's some things I need to update, but this toolbox allows me to install all these different IDEs over here. And there's a ton of them under there. Some of them are very specific for different languages. Other ones are very specific for handling just data. So if you're doing a lot of data stuff, you may want to use something like DataSpell. You will see I have Data Grip installed and PyCharm. Those are the main two that I use. I've coded Ruby, I've coded all sorts of other languages, and I've just used PyCharm to do that. But they also have very specific IDEs for those languages as well. All right. Anybody got any questions on IDEs? You are not going to want to use idle for this class. All right. You graduated from Python 360. If you use idle in this class, you are going to be pulling your hair out. So please use Visual Code or please use PyCharm as your IDE. Why? It's going to give you auto completion. It's going to give you help on your code, tell you you're doing something wrong. That's what professionals use. Whether you like it or not, you're professionals now in Python. Okay.
Cool.
At least that's what I'm going to tell you until you graduate.
I'm more of a Notepad plus.
You know, at least Notepad plus gives you more feedback than idle does. And and I've used Notepad plus. I've used Wing IDE. I've used all sorts of IDEs. PyCharm by far for Python is way better, especially for the topics we're covering in this class. All right. Let's get back to the content. Make sure I got that. Before you do that, you obviously want to install Python. So go and grab the latest version of Python. If you don't already have it installed on your machine, it should be 3.11.4. That's what I'm going to be covering in this class. So just like you did in 360, download it, install it. It will do that as part of your PyCharm install, but go ahead and do this. We will be using virtual environments and things that we have never talked about before. We will be talking about that in the IDEs. And I'm going to cover that in great detail on Thursday. All right. Let's go back to the shell real quick. Okay, so let's go back to week 1. All right, another thing, just like 360, everything gets released on Sunday. So week 2 will get released this Sunday. Homework assignments, if there are any that week, are due on Sunday at midnight. All right. Again, I'm flexible on the due dates, but don't let yourself get behind. All right. I saw students last semester just pulling out their hair trying to catch up on assignments. Don't do that. There's way too much in this class to do. Even though there's only like 4 mini projects, those mini projects are going to take you time. So don't wait till the last minute in this class. All right. That gets you through the GitHub, gets you Visual Studio, and gets you your JetBrains installed, and make sure your Python's up to date and ready to roll. All right. Anybody have any questions on the stuff we're going to cover in that? All right. So Thursday, we're going to do a really deep dive into PyCharm, how to use it, how to get around in there. I encourage you guys to go play with it a little bit before then. Just be familiar when it pops up. There is a new view when you pop into PyCharm. It's got like this new UI. Don't use the new UI, use the old UI. So if it pops up and says, hey, do you want to use the new UI? No, use the old UI. I played around a little bit with the new UI. Things are hidden and missing. And yeah, it looks nice and clean like your Visual Studio, but it hides everything. So go with the old UI. And if you want to chase it on the new side, that's fine. Just know I can't help you because I'm going to be showing you the old one. All right. So make sure you get all this stood up. Make sure you get your GitHub account, everything logged in there. Don't do anything just yet with DigitalOcean and all that. We'll cover that when we get to that section. But at least get GitHub up and running. So the way that'll work, I'll show you in the IDE on Thursday how to create a new project, how you upload that to GitHub. And that way, the idea is when you're done with this class, that you actually have a GitHub portfolio with all these projects in it. So as a developer, or if you're going to be doing more with Python, when I hired Python people out in industry, I always went through their GitHub account, right? You have a LinkedIn and you have their profile, but I want to know if you actually can code. So this gives you 4 projects that show that you know how to use PyCharm and know how to use GitHub and execute and show a potential employer that you have these projects. All right. They know it's not going to be clean. You can clearly say this is for Fort Hays Advanced Python, blah, blah, blah. They're going to show your commits and all that kind of stuff. And I'm going to talk a whole lot more about GitHub on Thursday. But if there's one rule with GitHub, commit and commit often. I don't care if it's the minus of changes. You change the name of a file or you change one file, commit and do another commit after that. There's no reward for getting done in the least amount of commits. Matter of fact, you will really not like yourself if you don't do a lot of commits. All right. So you can have 400 versions of everything in there. That's okay. Like you want 400 commits on a project, because then that means you can roll back at any one of those points. Where before you guys probably kept 400 files of the same thing, version 1, version 2. Yeah, no more of that. We'll use GitHub for all that.
Okay. Talk about the PyCharm Professional, and it says download for free 30-day trial.
Go down a little.
So did you sign up as a student?
Yes.
Okay, once you do that and you download that, they will give you a key for that. And
Okay.
actually what will happen is when you download PyCharm, you will log in with your student account and it will automatically assign the license.
Okay, cool.
If it doesn't automatically assign it, it will walk you through how to go get the code and paste it in.
Gosh. Okay.
But if you do the toolbox, and when you sign in with this in there, it will automatically start associating all that. That's the other reason I recommend doing the toolbox first, then downloading PyCharm through the toolbox.
Gotcha.
And it looks like the latest version is 2023-2.
Cool.
So that's or .2. That's the one we'll use for this class. I will freeze it and not update it. I don't recommend updating during the semester. Like pick one, that's where you stay. All right. Anybody got any questions overall so far?
Makes sense.
Okay, so for this one, let's see here. What else can I show you while we're in here? Let's fire up PyCharm real quick. We still got some time here today, so I'll cover a little bit about this. So let's see, you go out to your GitHub. That's a good place to start. So everybody is logged into their GitHub, should have a GitHub student developer pack. Log into your GitHub. All right. GitHub, again, is where you're going to store all your projects. Those are called repositories. So GitHub is a great way for you to share your code with other people. It's also, if you guys have ever added libraries or something like that into your Python projects, you're probably loading somebody else's GitHub code into your project. Whether it was pip install, which means it was packaged for pip, or you're checking out somebody's code online, you're going to do a lot of that in this class. All right. 90% of this class is using other people's code. That's just the way Python works. All right. This that you see up here was another project I was working on, so we can ignore that. Let's do a new project. All right. So when you do new projects in here, there's a couple different ways to do it. For us, what we are going to want to do is always start at GitHub and create a new repository on GitHub. So you guys will see something similar like this when you first log in. You'll click on new for a repository. Under the repository name, you'll have something like mini project 1JZ. All right. Then you can set this to public or private. You will need to set them to public so that I can see them when I go to grade them. All right. Inside of that, you can go ahead and tell it to add a README or whatever else, doesn't matter. We'll talk about README files and all those things. And then create repository. And then down below, it's going to tell you how to set all this up and start adding files, this and that. What we care about is stealing this line right here, which is this git. So I'm going to copy that. Then when I come into PyCharm, I go to file, new project, or not new project, sorry, file new, file, nope, quit clicking on that. File new, there we go. And that is not what I wanted. Okay, let's try this again. Close projects, there we go. All right, when you first launch, you're going to see something like this in PyCharm, okay? What we want to do is this top where it says get from VCS. We're going to click on that. The URL, that's what we're going to paste in. This should be your GitHub address that goes straight out to your project. All right. You can use PyCharm to create the repository. I encourage you to go to GitHub first, create your repository. You're going to check that out into PyCharm. All right. So you get this checked out, you hit clone. What that's going to do is take your code off of your GitHub repository and marry it into your PyCharm as it goes through there. So when you first do this, it's going to ask you for your GitHub username, password. You're going to set all that up. You're going to need to authenticate yourself so that you can allow PyCharm to submit things up to your GitHub. It'll walk you through on how to do all of that. All right. Once you get that up and running, you'll get this initial file and you'll see these settings. Again, on Thursday, we're going to dive into this in more detail. But when you want to make changes or you're adding something like right here, it added a main.py. We can tell that we added it because it's red over here on the left-hand side. We want to make sure we commit that file to our new found repository that we have. So if we go to Git up here at the top, we'll go to commit. In here is a commit message. So every time you guys do a commit, what that is freezing all of your code at that point in time so that you can revert back to that at any one point in time. So you, again, want to make sure, even if it's the minus of changes, very minor changes, do a commit and go back to it. Because if you do 30 changes in your project, and then I got to go back here, I have to lose all 20 of my changes or all 30 of my changes if I revert back. So do little increments as you go along.
Okay.
It's hard to get used to, but do it right away. Like
quick saving.
Yeah, it's like quick saving everything else, but make sure you have that version to go back to. So in this commit, we're just going to call this our initial commit. All right. And then down here at the bottom, we can see these project settings. We got to tell it what files we want to add and commit. So the only one we want to add is this main.py. Put a check mark in that. What's cool about this commit part down here is you can adjust the different things that you want to do for commit, but down at the bottom, it's going to tell you the version. If you are using a different version, it's going to tell you what changes you did. That way you know whether or not you made a change to that. So remember, red up here means that you are not committing this. Green, which if I click off of this on another one, green is going to be ones that end up being committed. All right. If we cancel that, if we come over here to main.py, we right click and go to Git and we add, you'll notice it now went green. That means when we go to commit, it's going to add that file to our repository. Two different ways of doing the same thing. And that's the reason I'm recording these videos. You can go back and play this over and figure out what I'm doing. All right. So you can go to Git, commit, and then down here at the bottom, you have the option to commit that change. And you have that option to, if you hit the drop down, to commit and push. Always commit and push. So what's the difference? I can commit my changes, but everything I'm doing is local to my machine, right? If I commit and push it, I'm pushing it out to GitHub. Why is that important? What if your laptop dies tomorrow? You lose your entire project. All right. Always commit and push. Leave it out there on the cloud. That's what the beauty of the cloud is the cloud doesn't, in theory, die. Right? My laptop dies, no problem. I grab another laptop, get PyCharm on it, up and rolling, check out my project, I'm back up and running. Okay. It doesn't sound like it ever happened. Happened to 3 students last semester and I only had 8. Okay. Their laptop died, something happened, they lost their project. Always commit and push. What happened was they were just committing to their local stuff. And then when they go out to GitHub and say, okay, my project's ready, I go out there, there's nothing there. Like, well, you never pushed all of your stuff. All right. So always commit and push. It's just a good habit to get into. So commit and push. And then when it comes up here, it's going to say, are you sure this is what we're going to push out to the project? Yep. We're going to hit push. And now down here at the bottom, you will see that it's pushing down here at the bottom. It's going to ask for me to log into my GitHub because I haven't done it yet. All right. So we log into GitHub and we're going to say authorize my connection in GitHub. Great, this all worked. Go back to my page, PyCharm, and you can see it's already gone. It's already pushed and done. Over here, we can say pushed main branch. All right. We're going to talk more about how GitHub works. It's a branch-based system and it's version control, right? So there's Git for version control. There is Subversion. It's another popular one. Mercurial is another good version commit. Those are all different ways of doing version control on your code. We use Git because Git pretty much won, right? Subversion was one. It's okay, but it's not really good for collaborative work. It was like one person only type stuff. Git is meant for you to work with multiple developers. And in the real world, that's how it works. So when we worked on major Python projects out in industry, you know, all four of us were committing and working on the same code at the same time. The only way that works is we had to have one master checkout as we're going through. Then the goal is everybody's on the main branch, right? I want to add new codes or new features. I create a new branch. I add all my fancy code. I commit those changes back to the main branch. Once everybody commits those changes in, then those are the code that everybody can check out. So the idea is you can have 20 developers all working at once on the same project, working on individual pieces of the code. So that's why we're using Git. So if you guys haven't played with that, and it sounds like some of you have at least had experience with that, that's the reason we're using Git here. That allows you to have multiple branches. In this class, we're just going to work with the main branch to begin with. Then once I get you guys understanding how main branch works, eventually you'll at least have a dev branch. And those are the only two we'll expand on in this class. All right. There's a whole lot to learn DevOps wise if you start going further and further. I know this is a lot of information. We're going to cover it in more detail on Thursday. All right. But if this worked, then I should be able to go out here to GitHub and I come back to my main project page and I hit refresh. And lo and behold, I have my main.py down here, which was the file that PyCharm created as a basic file. All right. If I wanted to check out this code, all I have to do is give this link to somebody. They can get access to my code. This link up here at the top, this URL, is what you would submit for this homework assignment. So once you get all your updates and your commits and all your files and everything in there, you just tell me what this URL is. I go out and check it out. All right. You don't have to give me access or any of that kind of stuff. I can check it out just like anybody else. Anybody got any questions on that so far? So unlike before, you're not submitting Python files to me anymore, etc. You are submitting them up to your GitHub repository. Here's the other thing. You're having problems with your code, right? Submit it up to the GitHub repository and tell me to check it out. Tell me which commit is the one you want me to do. So if I look here at the dots, it's going to tell me this commit, right? It's going to give me the word, which I called it initial commit, right? Remember when I gave it that message? But this is the actual commit number. If you tell me that actual commit number, you can keep working, but I go to that commit so that I know what you were having problems with. Does that all make sense? Instead of passing files back and forth and, oh, that's the wrong version of it. Nah, we're using Git. All you have to do is say, here's my project at this location. Here's the commit I'm having troubles with. I can check out your code and start playing with it. All right. That also means if you want me to, I can fix your code and push it back up.
That's so cool.
Right? You just allow me to be able to work with your repository. I push it up into dev branch. You can see the changes I made. If you like them, you accept them and it commits it to your code. Cool. All right. Let's see here. What else do we want to talk about? So once we're in PyCharm, again, we'll go into more detail of all the different nuances and how to set things up and run it. You guys all remember going to run and idle, right? And executing your code. So if I go up here at the top, I have this play button that's going to execute this particular file that I have open. Unlike idle, over here on the left-hand side is going to be your entire project. So right now, under my project called mini project JZ, I have just a main.py file. I can add a bunch of other files in there, and your projects will have multiple files. It's another reason we're using Git and not zip files. It's too big. It doesn't work that way. All right. So if I come up here and hit run, down here at the bottom, it's going to execute that code. And you can see in this case, we're just printing out hi PyCharm, right? There's a couple other buttons that we'll talk about down here at the bottom. One, Git is going to tell us all the different changes and everything else we made. We're going to tell you how to use git ignore files so you don't commit your extra files. So whatever you do when you come up here to git and commit, don't just click on these unversioned files and add them all. There's certain files you don't want to add. In other words, you don't want to add your project files from PyCharm to this, right? We're going to add that to our git ignore so that it doesn't upload that. There will be things when we start dealing with APIs and you guys go and get an API key. Don't submit your API key to GitHub. Put that in a file that's in your project, but it does not commit that out to the real world. You don't want other people stealing your API key, right? because they can use it for their own stuff and then you get banned and you don't get an API key. Even worse is if you pay for some of these APIs and you may find something really cool and you want to pay for it, you don't want somebody else to have that code. So what you tell me in your project, and I'll explain this, is you guys will say, go get an API key for this, plug it in this file, and my project will execute from there. And I'll show you how to use config files for that. That is username and passwords, API keys, etc. You're going to put those in a config file that never gets committed to GitHub. I should not see username and passwords, right? I'm a cybersecurity guy. Please don't do that. All right. The goal is that I, as a professor, can come in, grab my own API key, slip it in the config file, and it executes the same. Cool. All right. What else do we have down here at the bottom? You have the run, which is what you guys just saw. You have terminal. So from the terminal, this is a great way to pip install packages. And you guys will be doing a lot of pip install in this class. So when we created this project and we checked it out, right now I'm down here running on this Python 3.9. Okay. In the original Python 360 class, everybody installed Python, and then every package you installed, it worked for the entire platform. Well, that's a problem because every time you work on a project, you actually want a different Python environment. In other words, I don't want to pip install matplotlib and pip install pandas on a project I'm not using matplotlib and pandas for, right? It makes it very messy as to what your Python environment is using. So the first thing we want to do is set up a Python interpreter down here at the bottom, which is its own instance of Python down at the bottom. Does that make sense? So you are going to have your own instance of Python for every single project that you build out. The reason for that is we're going to show all the requirements in Python. So when I check out your project, I run your requirements file, it pip installs all the requirements I missed, and then it's ready to execute. But it does not interfere with his project or his project or his project, etc. You guys want to do the same way. You don't want mini project 1 interfering with mini project 2 because you may use different versions of different files. So to do that, down at the bottom, you would click on this Python 3.9 and you would click add interpreter, and we're going to add local interpreter, and we're going to say new. Down here on the location, you just leave that as is the default. Base interpreter, we want to make sure you're selecting Python 3.11. All right, I have 3.9 and 3.11 installed. You guys want to use 3.11 for all your stuff. The only caveat to not using 3.11 is you guys may get into some of your projects and it only supports 3.9. It doesn't support 3.11. Then go install 3.9, but then tell me in your code, I must have Python 3.9, and then it would go ahead and install all that code. All right. Sometimes when you start dealing with third-party packages, you can't use the latest and greatest Python. You have to go back a few versions to work. All right. So I say 3.11, and I do not want to click inherit global site packages and hit OK. This is creating what's called a virtual environment in Python. Now, there's a lot of cool, fancy stuff you can do on the terminal, virtual VMV, and all this other stuff. This is why we use an IDE. It does all that for you in the background. All right. Should you know it? Yeah, you should know an understanding of what virtual environments are. But at the end of the day, that's what your IDE is for. It's putting you in the environment for this code. Does everybody understand what virtual environments are? If not, I can dive into it more. But the idea is it's a instance of Python. There's no packages installed. If I go down here to Python packages, maybe. Still installing, still discovering. There you go. These are the only packages installed right now in this particular Python instance. In other words, pip, setup tools, and wheel. That's it. In other words, the basics to start installing other modules. If I was to type in pip install whatever here in the terminal, so say I pip install pandas, right? It's going to install pandas package for me. And then if I go over here to my packages, I should see pandas. I don't. Anybody know why? Because my packages that I was using, or when I did this terminal, I am not inside that virtual instance that I just created. How do I know that? Over here on the far left-hand side, we can see PS over here. I should see something that says VENV. That tells me I'm in my virtual environment. I don't see that here, and it's not showing up. So what I need to do is click the plus sign up here. And now I have a local instance, and you can close this first one, that says VENV at the bottom. All right. So now if I do something like pip freeze is going to list all the packages that are installed on this system. Notice nothing popped up. Nothing's there. If I go back to a terminal that would be for my base operating system, and I do a pip freeze, I got lots of packages installed on my local system here. Okay. So the idea here with these virtual environments is you can keep containerized between the different changes inside of there. All right. You can do a pip install here to pip install pandas, for example. That is not how you spell pandas. Try again. There we go. And we can see that it went ahead and installed everything it needed to do. Spell pandas correctly. There we go. Perfect. Now it goes through, installs all the packages that are necessary to go along with it. Notice it's installing NumPy and SciPy, which are things that we're going to talk about in our first project. Don't install pandas in your projects right now. Okay, I'm just showing you what this looks like in here. Oops, hit the wrong button. All right, down here at the bottom, you're going to see indexing. So if you need to see if it's working or still doing whatever, look down here at the bottom. That way you know it's doing its thing. The faster your laptop, etc., the faster this will go. Okay. This is going. Come on. Now, this makes a valid point. I'll show this here in a minute. It pip installed them. Everything looks like it got installed. If I go to Python packages, and again, I need to refresh this. So I hit refresh. It's still updating all that. There you go. You can see it now has all those packages installed. It also tells me what version is installed. That will be important too, as you guys are working on your projects. Sometimes it requires an older version of some package or a very specific version of a package. You will have to go pip install, and then you tell it the very specific version that you want to install. All right. In this class alone, pip is going to automatic, or your packages are going to update, right? So for example, when we use pandas and we're using pandas 203, by the end of this class, it will not be 203. That is why we are going to freeze those at that version so that when I test it, I don't go pip install pandas because it's probably going to be a new version. I'm going to install the very specific version that you do. All right. And I'll show you guys on Thursday how we do that. Other than that, you do have a Python console. The Python console is handy if you want to interact with your scripts. So we'll talk a little bit more about that. But if you want to get live data out of your database or something like that, you can use this live console to do that. All right. Other than that, it looks like it's doing its library, other settings. Down here at the bottom, for those of you on Mac and Windows, we ran into a big issue on this. So make sure you guys do this universally. Make sure your line separator down here is set to CRLF and that your spacing is set to 4 spaces on your indent. Okay. If you are using a Mac, it's going to default to something else. Please don't do that because I can then not execute your code. Make sense? So always code it in the universal UTF-8, CRLF, and 4 spaces going through there. All right. If you get into PyCharm here and you're starting to run stuff, say, for example, I do this, you're going to get some squiggly lines. Go ahead and do the squiggly lines. Come on. Normally it does the squiggly lines. And what you will see in some of this is it'll do like squiggly lines underneath of that and tell me something's wrong. If you mouse over it, it's going to tell you what's wrong. It's probably a spacing issue. Like I need to have 2 spaces above this, or I need to have this or that. That is called Pepe compliance. When you guys wrote your code, you remember how it just like went on forever off to the right-hand side? You had to scroll across and idle. This gives you this line, which I can see this line right here. Your code should never go past that line. It should break down to the next line below it. All right. I'm not enforcing Pepe compliance. It's good for you to do that because otherwise your IDE is going to yell at you. GitHub will yell at you. Everything else if it's not in compliance. So just code in compliance to begin with. So if I have a really long list that goes all the way across, it's simple. Just hit enter and go down. Nobody gets a reward for the least amount of code in this class, right? Like, I don't care if it's 2,000 lines, just make it clean as it goes down and organized. Anybody got any questions?
I think just kind of diving in and getting
just
familiar
diving
with
into
it.
play. Go out, go to GitHub, create a project, add something in, do something minor, simple, commit back and forth. Doing that is going to make Thursday and stuff a whole lot easier as we go through and test that.
Yeah.
All right. So Thursday is all about getting this in. I will bring up, I think I have visual code, but it's probably an old one. Yep. So here's visual code. This is in a C programming class, but it's very similar here. There's a new, you can then associate that with your that's a new file. You actually want to open their structure. So let's see, close. There again, I am in this because I use it for very certain things like building out Marlin for Aware for my 3D printer. I use it for that, but I don't use it for other stuff, right? But you guys can go in here, and if you step in through it, or if you need help, YouTube is your friend, right? So go out, you can get the source, and you can set it up to work with Python. You can set it up to work with GitHub in a very similar fashion where you're committing code. That one may require that you use the terminal and use git, commit, and all the command line version of doing git. There again, use PyCharm, right? You're more than welcome to use it. I'm not saying you have to use PyCharm. Just know that I can't help you walk you through that. All right. Anybody else got any questions? Other stuff that we will look at in PyCharm, and I'll show you guys throughout the semester on how to do that. If you come down here to settings, and you can change your UI colors, make it yours, you know, do whatever you want. It's your editor, right? But on plugins, there's going to be some plugins that we're going to add later on to help assist you in doing certain things. So like this one right off the bat has an AI assistant that's going to help you do auto code completion. One of those that I've used in the past is like Kite is a very popular one for PyCharm and Python. Markdown is another one that you may want to add in. There's a bunch of other ones, and we'll talk about them in the class. What these all do is just help you with certain type of files. So like this ignore one, I want to add that ignore one. And what that allows me to do is add things to my git ignore. Your git ignore file is what tells Git, don't copy these files to my repository, AKA don't copy files that have config.py, right? That means if a file name is config.py, it never uploads it to the web. Therefore, you put your usernames, passwords, API keys, stuff like that in there. And we'll talk about how to set that up. All right. Really trying to think of anything else that we can cover in today's session. Like I talk about, we'll play with APIs. So one of the first things we'll do next week is we'll go back through object-oriented programming. Make sure you guys remember how to do that. Make sure you guys remember how to do pip installs and the basic format of a mini project. But one of the first things you guys are going to do is go play with APIs, right? So I'll get you guys hooked up with whatever API you want. Doesn't matter. We'll talk about that. The goal is just that you get in the habit of interacting with an API. How do you retrieve information from somebody else? So far, you guys have built projects. You guys have all your data. Our goal is to obtain data from somewhere else and do something with it. So for example, last year, they got super excited because sports betting became legal last fall, right? So we built some sports betting applications that would pull and get API stats from DraftKings and the NFL and being able to place bets, that kind of stuff. Obviously, I'm not a bookie. We're not building bookie applications here. But the intention is that we'll do something fun. We'll let you guys decide what we're going to do. We'll pick one of the APIs we go through, and we'll run through and build something cool with that API. And I've dedicated a couple weeks to that. And then eventually, you guys will learn the first couple pieces of like NumPy, SciPy, and then you guys will take that API and you're going to build that for your first web application. So when we start dealing with data and panda frames and all of that, you're going to associate with some API, build that out, fill that in, and then build a UI for that data. All right. But this is still open like 360 was, meaning you do what you want to do. It does not have to be what he does. I don't tell you to go build this because you guys are only going to have fun with this if you guys are doing the stuff you want to do. Right. So come to class, have fun. Tell me what you want to do with code. Like there's no bad ideas, right? We'll all vote as a class as to which one we're going to cover in class, but that is not your project. You can go off and do something completely different. I can tell you right now, I am not like a Python wizard, despite what other people say. I am not. Okay, there's way too much to know, way too much to learn. I know guys that are Python wizards, but trust me, he can't teach a class because he is way up there and can't talk to people. Like he's a totally different guy. Great guy, but he interacts with the fridge and a coffee machine and himself and a computer. All right. We are going to get you to be somewhat like those people, but you should know what's going under the hood. If there is something that you want to know in this class and I'm not covering it, tell me. All right. I love adding new stuff to the class. I will try to add whatever's in there. If you want, this is my cool project. I really want to do this. Great. Let's do that. All right. If you guys want to get into embedded microprocessors and you want to build some IoT device and build that as part of one of these projects, I will help you figure out a way to make that work. All right. I've got some cool IoT microprocessors and all that stuff. I helped students this summer program little microprocessors in Python. So like if I can teach high school students to do it, you guys should be able to do it, especially because you already took Python 360, right? Any questions? All right, I'm gonna stop the recording.